Hey guys, it's so cool to see you here for the final part of our special series on human blood. After you donate blood, it does end up getting put to good use, of course. People who are in need of it are often able to get blood transfusions. Keep watching to see how this works and to find out what you need to pay attention to. First off, blood transfusion is a fancy word that basically just means that blood gets taken out from one person and given to another. That is, the blood is transferred from the donor to a recipient. So what we're talking about here is a really important procedure. And when it comes to blood transfusion, it's extremely important to make sure that the donor's blood type gets along with the recipient's blood type. This means they either have to have the same blood type or they at least need to be compatible. Compatible? The first blood transfusion took place in 1492. Pope Innocent VIII is said to have tried to rejuvenate himself by drinking the blood of 3 young men. This creepy experiment failed, of course. The young men died and the Pope didn't get any better. Later on, people tried to do blood transfusions between animals and people. For example, sick people were given sheep's blood, which didn't go so well either. The modern science surrounding blood transfusion only goes back about 100 years or so, since before that, the technology for it wasn't even there. The blood types A, B and O weren't discovered until the early 20th century, laying the foundation for blood transfusion. At first, blood was always transfused directly from the donor to the recipient. Gradually, we started to use the system of blood banks and storage that we know today. The first blood transfusion took place in 1492. Blood type is what determines whether a certain donor matches up with a certain recipient. Human blood is classified according to the ABO system. And then there's also the Rh factor. So we have the blood types A, B, AB and O, and the Rh factor can be positive or negative. When a blood transfusion is performed, the blood types need to be compatible according to both the ABO system and the Rh factor. Blood type O is considered to be the universal donor since it can get along with all the other blood types. And in addition to the universal donor, you might also hear of a universal receiver. People with blood type AB positive are able to take blood of any other blood type, which is why we say it's universal. If you want to know how all these blood types come about, check out our video on them. Not considering blood type when doing a transfusion can lead to severe complications for the patient or even death. To ensure that blood transfusions are performed without any problems, donated blood is immediately sent to a lab, where the techs are able to determine the blood type and Rh factor. After determining the blood type, it's still necessary to conduct one more diagnostic test. This test is able to detect substances in the patient's blood that might end up wreaking havoc when receiving a blood transfusion. More specifically, they screen the blood for antibodies that might attack the foreign blood cells and cause all kinds of trouble. This ensures that recipient only gets blood that he or she doesn't have any antibodies against. If this isn't done, the new blood cells could end up getting destroyed. Then there are certain tests that are helpful to both the recipient and the donor. For example, screening for infectious diseases. This means finding out if there are pathogens in the blood that might cause things like hepatitis B or hepatitis C. They also look for anything that might indicate the sexually transmitted disease syphilis, and they check for the presence of infection with the autoimmune disease AIDS. If they can't find anything, there's nothing else standing in the way of a blood transfusion. Right before the transfusion can take place, one last thing on the checklist is cross-matching. The purpose of cross-matching is to make sure that all the information is correct. In order to check this, a technician mixes blood serum from the recipient with red blood cells from the donor. If the red blood cells clump together, the transfusion can't go forward. By the way, in medical jargon, this is called agglutination. If there's no agglutination, then the transfusion gets the green light and it can go ahead. Okay, so here's what we've learned. Blood transfusion is the transfer of blood from a donor to a recipient. To prevent any trouble during transfusion, it's important to check the blood type in the ABO system as well as the Rh factor, both of which were discovered in the early 20th century. Blood type O is the universal donor and blood type AB positive is the universal receiver. In this case, universal means compatible with all blood types. Neglecting blood type and Rh factor can lead to serious complications or circumstances that could even be deadly. Also, recipients should only get blood that they don't have any antibodies against. Donated blood is also checked for diseases like hepatitis B and hepatitis C, syphilis and HIV. And just to make sure all the bases are covered, a cross-match is performed right before the transfusion takes place. If everything's cool with the donor's blood and it matches the recipient, that's the thumbs up needed to go ahead with the transfusion. We hope you've gotten something out of this and that you understand how important this topic is. So keep your chin up and we'll see you soon.